Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hi, Sue Rose Minahan again. June 9th, Gemini returns. Communication, many facets connecting the minds, collaboration, neighbors, boundaries, Hermes, Mercury's, all of these and even more, because today you are talking to a Gemini mind, and I have a wonderful Gemini soul that is joining me again. Not again, but again on this show, and her name is Shannon Hayes, an evolutionary astrologer from Seattle, Washington. You can find Shannon on our webpage site, Talk Cosmos. She's in the process of restructuring her website, and she gives consultations. Shannon is an animal activist, a stargazer, of many different descriptions. So, yes. So, hi, Shannon. Let's just get started. We have so many connections. We're just going to roll out right along in this fashion.
Hi, Sue. Thanks for having me on board here.
Well, it's a total delight. We've really been expanding our conversation a lot on so many subjects. And I think where we started, because how can you start? But there is a start. Back in Sumer which was 3,000 BC, with the beginning of writing, which, because Gemini is that description of our external, with, I know that we were thinking then about Hermes.
Hermes, the Greek name for Mercury that precedes the Roman name. Mercury is actually the Roman name for Hermes. And that was really great conversation that we had about Hermes and all the different manifestations, the different faces of Hermes.
Well, it's true, because it is change, just like the energy never gets destroyed. And in that cycle of archetypes, Gemini being the third, an air sign, Mercury itself, it goes backwards, it seems, 3 times, because it goes fast around the sun 3 times. But
And is closest to the sun, right?
yes, and very fast.
And very fast. And in the ancient days, it was also, since it's also a sign of duality, it was also associated at one time with Apollo, because of the fact that it was one of the only signs one of the only planets that they saw at the time that was in the sky in the day and the evening. So during the day, they called it originally Apollo. In the evening, it was Hermes, right?
Yes. You had brought that up, and I was noticing it too. It's interesting how thought evolves. This whole language, this start way back with Sumer, that because thought was always there, and words, but writing them down, and this Mercury being so close to the sun, which now we think of Apollo as the sun.
Right, and wasn't it Hermes that actually had the caduceus that was given to him by Apollo, right?
Yes.
So there is that Sun-Mercury connection, and them being so close, because Mercury is the planet that's closest to the sun, right? And can also be hidden behind the beams of the sun.
Yes, learning that language. I love how you're relating it, because for our audience, it is really learning the symbolism of it. They have, how can they describe things? But that's right. And Hermes, which meant stone, because it did have boundary. It means stone. It was used for boundaries, because it does involve transportation and movement, just like Mercury does. Yes, around the sun.
Right, and marking, right? So boundary marking. So it also Yeah, it was almost like categorizing in a way,
Oh.
like so it kind of it yeah, it was a form of like being able to name and categorize, which is totally a Mercury function, right?
Yes, and knowing where one spot ended for their property, or maybe where to go in the distant hills to another spot. But, and I'm going back to your thought of the exchange, because Hermes received the caduceus. Yes.
Caduceus from Apollo, right?
Yeah, the tree of life with two serpents. We don't often think of.
Entwined around.
Yes. And it's a very apt description for the real energy, because the spirit and matter of Gemini, those two twins where they had to communicate. And between, well, one twin dying, and so they were in the story. And the life, the beginning of life, the end of life, the changes, such as the serpent, regeneration.
Right, the death and regeneration, right? The one twin dies and the other one is immortal. So the immortal one, doesn't he give up his life to join his brother, right?
Well, in a sense, but, well, he couldn't. Yes, I mean, he couldn't give it up, but he could give his place. That's right. With the heavens.
Yeah, exactly.
So they went down to Hades.
Yes.
The messenger, and isn't, yes.
Right. The messenger, right? Mercury is the messenger of the gods also, and he was the one who was able to go between worlds. So he could communicate with the gods and also with the mortals on Earth, right? Which I think that is also a lot represented with the Castor Pollux kind of story in their place in the heavens.
Yes. The whole point of so many of, we were going over all the attributes, but when you come to travel, merchants, commerce, trade, thievery.
Bartering.
Yes.
Right.
Bartering, thievery, trickster. That's a very interesting concept that about Hermes, and that because I think we were discussing how change, one doesn't always know. Well, change is inevitable, but still there's resistance. There's resistance for denial, many reasons, but sometimes we need to get, well, I don't know if we need to, but the fact is life does, that trickster energy changes what we see and what we get.
Right. I mean, there's the two sides to the trickster energy as well. So you have like the trickster that's fun and kind of a prankster, right? Because Gemini, I mean, and the Mercury energy and the Hermes energy can be really fun and lively, and can because it's air, there's a lot of movement, like you said, a lot of change, and they can be totally stimulating, or they can be the other direction where they can be stimulating, but it's not exactly what you'd expect and what you may not care for. So they can totally do like pranks and tricks and stuff that that to the opposite effect, the shadow side, a more negative sort of connotation.
Depending on what is aligned with, this is always the truth of spirit and matter. And as far as just politically looking at our neighbor, at the political situation, we have a trickster, as we said, perhaps in office, that, for instance, and I was just reading in the newspaper, which is a very mercurial item because, sharing the news, and there's support to back a VA program expanded, but behind the scenes, which is a trickster attitude, without judgment of whether it's good or bad, but the fact remains that there will not be any funding. So that is what you see is not what you get, which is perhaps that trickster. And so, of course, it'll depend on how the energies, how that works out with other, but it's that catalyst that doesn't get changed. It's
Right. It's the appearance of change, but nothing's really happening. It's just more in order to appease who needs to be appeased,
yeah.
which that is a form. That's the kind of shadow trickster energy that can happen with a lot of that sort of, that energy.
Because something does need to change.
Right.
Always will be. And so, again, not knowing how everything plays out, but as an example, that would be where it leaves the rest of communication to work it out. Interestingly, as I was looking around at articles and connections, there's new thought here that building on the 4 conditions that Roosevelt, the rights of people, that this would be a collaborative energy where people would, the right to learn, the right to, against tyranny, the right to innovate, and it's a collaboration of these great minds. So perhaps when the negative comes, or apparent negative, the stress of not seeing we think what will be evident, it is that force that and technology can help unite or show people how to get together, how to brainstorm, how to share ideas.
Right. Well, yeah, it's the push sometimes you need to get in order to get to the last straw, in order to get people to, like you said, share ideas, but come up with creative solutions, or come up with creative ways of making healthy change.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boy, what a wonderful concept, because really that's where the Gemini with new information helps change our perceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like, to go back just a wee bit, and we were talking about Hermes, right? And there are the 3 faces of Hermes, right? So, and those 3 faces are alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. And what we were just talking about, like, the politics and the gathering of minds to make creative, healthy change, reminds me of the whole concept of theurgy, which is like the operation or effect of a supernatural or divine agency in human affairs, right? And it kind of speaks a lot about that, where we're at now, even politically, because especially after the famous galactic alignment of 2012, there's a lot of change that's been happening, and some of it right now appears to be it's not looking so good. It's not healthy, and it's very, like you were talking, it was very confusing. It's mixed up. There's a lot of the shadow trickster energy happening right now. But there's also that other side, I think that, as you were saying, the creativity of humans is what kind of can pull things into a better perspective, which is also very Gemini mercurial. You have to have a change, like you said, of perspective. And I think that even though things don't always seem so great right at the moment politically, I think that good things can come out of this because there is a lot of change going on. And and sometimes it's like, the way things can happen, it does feel like there is a divine intervention somehow that helps push humans into getting together to make creative, positive change.
I like the idea of this, that it incorporates the spirit, that
right.
It's not just the matter,
right?
The physical,
right? Yes. It's that whole, like, spirit and matter together, right? So
unity, the unification,
right,
instead of fragmentation,
right?
Yes,
exactly. Exactly. The fragmentation would be more of the Neptunian kind of concept, where this is definitely more the other.
Well, in the newspaper, there was a man in Seattle Dr. Hubert Locke, and he was a scholar, clergyman, and a master of listening. And this shows the strength of collaboration. I just thought how wonderful it is to, with the written word, we can read, we can learn these ideas that other people exemplify, that people share in their many ways. And this man, he was one that was able to get people that would not have the same idea about any issue, but by bringing them together for collaboration, came up with great solutions, just like you were mentioning. And he was at the University of Washington. So the example was, well, he was from Detroit originally. So he brought together, he's just one individual. He had to do about the ocean, and he brought together a group of people that actually, but there's, as a civic center.
Yeah, and seeing that also speaks to the whole, like what you're saying about the spirit, about an intervention, right? I mean, listening is really an art form, to be able to actually sit and listen to someone rather than always feeling like you need to be saying something, and I think it's very powerful, like you were saying about the man who was able to bring all the people together. To be able to be heard is very important for people, And it also kind of like, it gives me like the whole picture of like Mercury being so close to the sun, right? It's like, Mercury riding on the sun's beams. The two are so close, and, if you're looking at the sun as being the whole, like,
Identity.
not just ego, but identity, exactly,
Or umbrella.
Right, the umbrella.
Everything.
Right, absolutely. It says a lot. So, yeah, Mercury is about communication, but the big part of communication people forget sometimes is listening, I think.
And it's so important that we have this free speech. It's really the premise of the entire nation that we are able to function with. For instance, I was just reading again about the journalists, and there's thought, of course, about leaks, and it's not new. There's been presidencies, and none of the presidents really like leaks because it is classified, which then you have to ask, well, what is classified? I mean, there are questions. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to have dialogue. It's okay to have communication. But really, in the case if journalism, which is listening and it's speaking, is that whole relationship. It's everything is that exchange, as we were talking about with commerce and with the twins and spirit and matter in many different fashions, because we can learn about what's going on, and to have safety in the sense that we are aware of the environment that we're part of, our neighborhood that we can contribute to. It is important to know what the truth is that's happening, and people have the intelligence to discern it if we have a diverse sources of information that we can, as I'm tying it back to listening, but also through writing. Right. There's a method. Thank you, Shannon.
No, but it's true. It's like, that's a huge part of it. I mean, since, even in, Sumerian period on up to now, there was always like news, whether they stood in pillars, like in small public gatherings, and would read off the news, like, in the Romans, right? They always had someone that would get up and, like, shout out the news, right?
A herald.
Right.
Orator.
Right. Exactly, the orator, right? Because they're still, they didn't quite have the means for the actual press of words that we have this day and age.
Yep, boundaries. It's an interesting thought about the fact, because going to Mercury, the changing of the boundaries, allowing him to be the messenger, the one God that could go to the Hades, where the bring the souls to the deceased, not for the deceased, but bring the deceased to the afterlife, or tell different gods. I mean, Zeus was always telling him to do different things, and he could do these because he could cross boundaries. But yet with that, it also means that when you can cross boundaries, you need to know where the boundary is, so you need to establish the boundary. And like with the news, we have gerrymandered boundaries.
Yeah.
Is that trickster? I think you had brought that up.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. I think that would be like, some trickster energy there.
And then I was noticing, here I'm jumping along, but that's the case. Quick little Gemini here,
That's
we're
a
going
quick
along.
Gemini mind for you, right?
At the park, Yellowstone Chief. Now it was saying there's too many buffalo, I guess. He wasn't saying it, but it's been told that he has, within the boundaries of the park, they have 4,000 buffalo, and we need 3,000 buffalo. Now, what they're going to do with the other 1,000
Oh,
buffalo?
God, they're not going to call them, are they?
Oh, I don't know. Are we going backwards in time? I would trust not. Think of how many people would maybe like a buffalo. But,
Your old pet buffalo.
Yeah, but so that's really a whole nother line of, if you have a park, with boundaries, it's there's so many relationships between elements of boundaries just to become aware of. We take it for granted. We think, well, on this street or that street, but really how we live with our neighbors is essentially the micro and the macro. It has great.
Right. Well, the whole concept of like neighbors and neighborhoods, right, is a kind of an interesting phenomena that, started probably the beginning of time as humans were trying to get to establish like the buying and selling of goods and to commerce, legislatures, small public senates, and in order to have a greater community. It was kind of self-preservation method, really, but it was all about commerce and trade and bartering and blacksmithing and all that stuff.
In fact, I think a lot of the records were about recording the transactions for trade.
Right.
Because I went in Chicago for UAC, went to the Oriental Museum at the university and looked at Babylonia, all the artifacts, which was so fascinating. And again it came out that the predominant recordings, starting this language, this written form of language that is decreed, that Sumeria created, was for the purpose of noting down
and
the exchange of
categorizing
trade.
and exactly, record keeping and
Not
because
that it stopped there, but
right, but it really kind of started. It was one of the places it started.
a tool.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It was a tool for keeping track of things.
And then I saw Hammurabi's law, his code of laws. It's on this enormous, if it is a replica, it stands about 10 feet up, and it's a large cylinder, it seems, with his sculpted frame on top of head. And then the entire pillar has his codes written down in the language. So he had the mind to use this language to establish other purposes. That's the great thing. A tool, once you invent it, has so many purposes. Yes.
Right. Absolutely. That would have been really interesting to see.
It was, since we can't actually go back to a place called Babylonia, but because, saw the toys they had. My goodness, which reminded me, too, people learn through play. Now, that's maybe more of a fifth house. It's correlated. There's a lot of these, and again, for you astrologers or non-astrologers there, one archetype links into the next. Of course, everything is connected, remembering that. Gemini says yes,
Yeah.
but so many of the archetypes do. Yeah. So, right, learning to play in many ways. In a bit, we're going to open up the phone lines. We welcome calls that people would like to comment. We're open to that. Or if you have a chart, we can take a few moments to look at it. Ideally, something that would pertain to the Gemini theme, but otherwise we can work with you, and you can always get in touch with Shannon or myself. Shannon is an astrologer here in town in Seattle, as I am, and on our website at Talk Cosmos, you can see a connection for either of us. That number will be 888-298-5569, and we'll talk. Otherwise, we'll continue our talking, but we really invite people to call in. And if there's any archives you want, go to our website at talkcosmos.com, and you can like us on Talk Cosmos Facebook, and you'll get the weekly announcements. And also, if you sign up on the talkcosmos.com for our email address. I'm in the process right now. Very shortly, I'll be sending out notices on that too. So we shall be back with you very shortly at Talk Cosmos on 1150 KKNW, Seattle. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the period of Gemini. By leaving a cycle based on physical form, integrated through spirit, the energy of Gemini connects spirit with matter, focused on communicating and defining the external. Gemini is a mutable air sign signifying flexibility. Gemini dually focuses upon teaching and learning in order to synthesize the world one lives within.
Ciao and greetings to all you folks out there that have got enough curiosity to tune in to what's going on here. My name is Jeff Peters. I am the Lively Astrologer, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our consciousness.
Hello again, Talk Cosmos. Sue Rose Minahan and Shannon Hayes, evolutionary astrologer based in Seattle. So we do welcome your calls, and remember that number is 888-298-5569. I'll repeat it once more, 888, that's easy to remember, 298-5569. So go ahead and call us if you have a question about your chart, or if you just have some brainstorming and think of anything that would be very Geminian, or questions. Learning. There's another article. I sat down today and clipped out a week's worth of articles because the newspaper, the free press, if it really does connect us. It tells us, and I was looking at, I'll bring that up in a moment, but really about free press, I was looking up the description online, and it is communicating that principle that you can communicate through various mediums, whether it's printed, electronic media. It's a right, and it should, as it says, to be exercised freely. And in the best countries of that is the best legal protectors, I might state, are many of the northern countries: Iceland, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands, Switzerland, along with Ireland and Jamaica. So this particular article was saying that Tennessee, and that's where the eclipse, the Great American Eclipse last August, 27th, I think, or was it the 26th of August, crossed right over Tennessee, Nashville. And I've been wondering, what news would come out of Nashville, since that's pretty powerful. And here it says that Tennessee's college promise could be Seattle's model, that our mayor is pushing to expand free community college program for high schools. She's also pushing to get transportation. Both of these are very Gemini.
Yep.
And that's for all the college kids. Not college kids, for high school kids. Yeah,
right, yeah.
thank you. And
Interesting.
and that article also indicated that it wasn't just the 2-year program that is being allowed, but they also had the courage to look at different aspects of education to make some other shifts that would make this possible. So it's just very flexible. That's mutable, like air and Gemini.
Yeah, education is definitely be like kind of Gemini, Mercury.
Energy, yes.
Yeah, that Gemini, Mercury energy, exactly. And I mean, education is like such an issue in this country because it's so expensive. It's so expensive, and they really do need to figure that out. There needs to be a solution for people to be able to be educated and it not totally bankrupt them. You know, so I think it's great that Mayor Durkin is on this. You know, she's, it's a priority. So, yeah,
And
it's exciting.
Makes me think too about the cities. I don't know, would neighborhoods are definitely a mercurial Gemini thing, and the cities seem to be really too that connection of commerce, trade, civilization is where it starts, is in the city, right?
Right.
So to have cities be communicating to each other really seems like one of the greatest strengths that we could do, which leads me to advocate, whomever chooses to listen, the value of not just speaking one's mind, but writing or communicating. We have such a wealth of opportunity, what with the internet, to be able to connect to governments or to be participating. That was one thing I was reading too, that really it is this equal exchange of citizen with the formal governing persons, that involvement, just like it would be in a school, PTA, that with that energy.
Right. Absolutely.
So if cities could really start sharing, which they do, I know they do on many levels.
Yeah, and they would do that, like through libraries and, like you said, like through after school sort of projects and people coming together, like neighborhoods, coming together to present ideas and information to like legislation, to create legislation and stuff. Helps out neighborhood block watches, for example,
Yes.
safety stuff and just learning in general. I mean, libraries are a great place. They still use libraries a lot for different neighborhoods. Libraries are really important still. That's a total Gemini, Mercury
For meetings.
energy for
Yes,
meeting.
that's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And after
that
school,
space.
they still do. A lot of kids, I noticed that in when I was living in White Center, we had a little library down the street from where I lived, and it was always full of young people coming together, either doing homework or meeting, with some of after school projects. Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, they have puppet shows there and tutoring. In fact, there
Right.
was another article about, it says early learning at night, that the public schools are now offering an evening option for families because some preschool classes are getting filled, which is just extraordinary to think of these little people. Of course, their parents might be working, so that could
Right.
be, a good option. And I suppose if they balance the sleep, according to the pictures, they look like they have lots of energy.
Yeah, little photography does wonders.
Yeah. Ooh, and that reminds me, clicking along here.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, there's another obituary. Remember, there's
Photographer,
death.
right?
We're going into the underworld along with the
With
serpents
Mercury.
and Hermes. Yes.
The serpents. Well, yeah,
Yes, we like serpents.
yeah, the serpents.
And in that glyph, going to the it's not just a glyph, but of the caduceus with the tree of life.
And
The
two
snakes, the heads face each other.
Right.
Which
Because
is like-
it's the duality. It's also, it represents the sun and moon energy, right? And the masculine and the feminine, right?
And yin and yang.
Right, and
Which
yin
were
and
the
yang, yep.
stars for Pollux and Castor.
And Castor,
Yeah, in China.
right? Yeah, I know.
So
Connections,
Yes,
huh?
yes. We want to hear yours
Yeah.
out there, you folks. But that's okay. We love to have you listening, and we love our audience, and we're happy. So, photographer David Douglas Duncan, he was famed for realistic images of war. He was 102 when he died, and this is again in this
Good
week's-
long life.
Yeah, just yesterday he died, and amazing photographs. And so, when we were speaking of school and pictures of the kids and the fact of listening and sharing. Pictures were the first, I think, the cuneiform. That
Right.
You could say that would really be a picture.
Yeah,
right?
they were kind of more picture writings, kind of like
Yes.
in the caves and stuff.
Yes. And so it has gone into many forms, which now we don't use that for our letters. But still, here you have it's a very important way of still communicating.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Instagram.
Yes.
It's huge. It's huge. I mean, I think Instagram is way more popular, especially with the younger generations than, Facebook. I think a lot of them think it's old hat, like older people use Facebook now. But it's like a lot of all my nieces.
You use Instagram.
I
You
love
can find
Instagram.
Shannon Hayes on
That's right.
Instagram. In fact, I'm really getting excited to use it myself.
That's right.
Oh,
Hayes,
boy.
what am I, 2053?
Say that again.
I think it's Hayes, S Hayes 2053. I'm on Instagram.
And that's
I love taking photos.
Hayes.
Yeah, Hayes, yes.
Well, I love adding little thoughts to it. So, yes, I think this will be a great dimension. And that's really the excitement, is if we think of media rather than what we don't have, what we can have. The fact is that free press,
Free speech.
exactly, it goes to all forms. Radio, here we are talking
That's
on radio,
right.
hello. And there's television, there's online, and there's methods of connecting, of reaching out. And one may not have the idea, but it's finding who does have the idea, or how can we meet, or because it's combining not just the resource of the ear or the visual with the internet, but then the person too.
Absolutely.
Just like digging out hard copies when you go somewhere and having to, which seems so archaic. But we do have paper still, thankfully.
Yeah. For those of us that still like to write.
Yes. And they say that by writing, it really connects brain cells. I
Right.
mean, of course,
Well,
you
it
can
really
use
helps
brain
with
cells,
memory, right?
but it
Yeah,
expands.
I know sometimes
It
I
jumps
question
in
that, but
the synapses, they jump. They have to work. They
Right.
recreate.
well, it
that
helps you
dimension.
remember, right? I mean, for me,
Mm.
writing, like, it helps me remember things when I write. Like when I type and when I text and stuff, it's like, I don't have to think as much about it for some reason. But when I'm actually writing, it hits something in my brain that it actually, and it helps me remember what I really need to know.
I've heard that. Many metaphysical disciplines or trainings, one encounters that very thought that if one is going to journal or to expand and get in touch with their higher self of truth, or however, in that process, that writing actually contributes instead of typing.
Yeah, no, I had a teacher when I was doing my yoga teacher training, and my teacher was in New York, and we had to write, like, to take notes. Like, he didn't want people using their computers and typing. Like, yeah, yep. And it does, it slows you down too, so it does a couple of different things, which is interesting, is like, sometimes it's easy, like when you're typing, like you hear and you can type at the same time because you don't really have to look when you're typing. But when you're writing, you really have to kind of look, right? But then you also have to learn to hear what you need to hear in order to write it down, right? I mean,
Yes, it does synthesize.
right.
And
It
that's another part
synthesizes
of
differently, right?
yes, of Gemini too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Writing, doing things with your hands, and the combination of like the multitasking, hearing and writing and
And reading, looking
reading.
at it.
Yep,
Yes,
exactly.
that's true.
Yeah.
And again, they say speak it so that you hear it. Well, I'm
Right?
looking at our chart. We haven't spoken about the astrology, but just to remind people in this program of Talk Cosmos, it is about the third archetype of Gemini, which we have mentioned has the twins and has Hermes and Mercury, and it's in the third house of the horoscope. And although it's a minor thought, well, I don't know if it's a minor thought. We won't do the judgment part. But right now, there's several from Seattle, because this would change wherever you are, but we're in Seattle, so that's why it's important. We have some powerful energies. We have Pluto in Capricorn asking to look at our conditioning and is it outdated? I would say, right? I mean, I would say that could be where we're talking about all these elements. And then also in Capricorn, the history of it. How far back? Where was this start? And of course, thought goes eternally back. But the written word that we use in the civilization has been Sumera, of the Babylonian Tigris, Euphrates rivers there in the Mesopotamia, 3,000 to 3,500 BC. Now, that's a long time ago. That's like 5,500 years ago. That's a long time of evolution. So this is a common thing that has been worked over the many eons. And then we also have what we call South Node and Mars in Aquarius.
In a tight conjunction.
Yeah, exactly, aren't they? That's right.
Yeah. I know, and with all that dynamic energy, like it also it's intense, so it plays out in a lot of different ways, especially like since it's in the third house in Seattle's chart, it has a lot to do with and I can attest this to driving.
Oh, yeah.
Brutal drivers, like, and aggressive, it's like for example, classic, I went to go to work this morning and I'm sitting at the light waiting for it to turn green, and light turns green and I start to go, and then I hesitated and I looked right at me and this guy ran the red light. And had I not seen that or felt it coming or whatever and put the brakes on, I would have plowed right into the guy. And he was so shocked, I think he just sat in the middle of the road, and I had to honk my horn to get him to move so I could turn. But it's like, I was just like, whoa. I mean, it's like, sometimes when you see that energy on a chart and, it's like you're aware of it and something like that happens, it's kind of mind-blowing, how the synchronization of the energy is so, it's there, you can't deny it. It's like.
Well, thank goodness you were connected to your
To
higher
something,
self.
right?
That's right. I'm glad to hear it, because it is a dynamic where ongoing this summer. There's a lot of remembrance that to be mutable, remembering air. It's that gift that we inhale and exhale that services our whole body and function.
Right.
And to look at what needs to be deconditioned, what needs to be saved, what needs to be deconditioned, where our energies might need another alignment without a sudden burst of
Right. Right.
getting clunked.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's the other thing. If we don't, something will.
That's right. Exactly. You either kind of get into the groove or the groove will be forced on you.
Yeah,
May the force be with
the
you.
groove will be forced on you. Hey, that could be a good trend. I like it. See, that's another thing. Words, they travel, and thoughts beyond time. In fact, back to that museum, I think I mentioned this last time, but it really sticks in my mind, and I can see now maybe the diversion, but there's so many purposes of play. They had board games. The guards had board games.
Oh, how cool. Seriously?
Yeah. I don't know what board game. I mean, I know
The
Go.
guards were playing board games
Yeah, that's
while
what
they
it
were
said.
working?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there wasn't a lot of action. Maybe they were just guarding, and so of course maybe that's why all the stories come along where something happened when they weren't looking. I don't know, but you know,
That's funny.
yeah. So I was thinking too, though, as far as like for this month, because there's many choices to learn through. Gymnastics is actually part of. I was surprised, part of Gemini. Because I think of that sometimes as Aries and Virgo, but it said gymnastics, so perhaps that Pacific one. So if a person wants, so the physical to unite, to learn, because people do learn through different methods, methodology. It isn't just, it's street smart and book smart, and street smart is experience, so there's all ways to experience life.
Oh, absolutely. Many different ways to experience life.
What about bikes?
What about bikes, Sue?
Well, I think of transportation. I wish we did live in an environment where we could get on a bike and just really, and I know Seattle's supposed to, but we have a lot of,
I was going to say, there are bikes everywhere here.
I know, but
It's just
there's a
kind
lot
of
of
scary.
traffic.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I was just going to say, yeah. It's not like, it's not flat and easy going. It's like, yeah, lots of cars and tiny streets and people honking and pedestrians everywhere. Yeah, it's kind of it's a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, and I suppose that is part of just accepting, because Gemini by itself, when I think about it, makes order out of chaos. We have the same
Right?
teacher with Maurice Fernandez, and he often, I remember seeing that written down, making order out of chaos. I mean, not order, by defining, by putting some,
By
Definition.
categorizing, by giving it names, right?
yes, knowing
Yeah.
how to refer to it. The name.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Naming is a big Gemini thing, right?
But out of that, there still can be chaotic
Right.
names and stuff. So I think getting familiar with,
It's like riding that wave, which is kind of a Gemini thing. If you think about like bicycling and traveling and stuff, traveling on waves or getting in the groove.
but getting familiar with our environment through these different means, whether it's through foot, through bicycles, through reading, through free libraries, little free
Writing,
libraries.
right?
Well, that's true. Like, are you thinking of like groups that write together? Or just,
Yeah. Yeah, different kinds of things, exactly. Or even like our astrology group. I mean, Mercury also rules. He was the original ruler of astrology.
That's true.
He's one of the three faces, alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. They're all three, the three faces of Hermes. Hermes Trismegistus.
I'm so glad you're going back, because that reminds me, it's going to tie us there, because of the fact that Pluto here for us in Capricorn, it is a matter of looking at our traditions, our structures, our history. And in one case, like, where is the life still serving us in those conditions, and where are they outdated?
Right.
Where do we need to break loose, get those serpents, go down to the afterlife?
Right. Well, and you see the resurgence of the interest in like the old Hermetic teachings of astrology and the classical astrology, and and like what Brett's doing, getting outside,
Gemini Brett.
right, getting out in nature and looking at the stars, stargazing, is getting in touch with your roots, right, with your past, with the old mothers and fathers, the old earth star astrology. It's very important to understand your past in order to make better changes for the future. And I think that's where a lot of people forget the importance of that.
I love this. I love this. This is really true. And going back to these mythology, the stories, the tales, the written word, and that's been passed on, because these were ancient ways of diagnosing, you might say, or expressing the environment and teaching the learnings of their experiences. Everything from when the rivers would flood for what moon was happening to the fertility, that they
Right.
for their
Fertility,
survival,
or to even
and the mystical.
or dividing, conquering kind of stuff too, creating different boundaries, and that was the form of communication, of passing down their history. It was all done by spoken word, right? And they would remember, and they'd tell the stories, and things would get passed down. And I mean, it's interesting because a lot of these stories are coming back around again in our day and age, and I think it's really important and really interesting.
Well, it is. For instance, the first story, and I mentioned this before, Gilgamesh, is very much about the afterlife. This is not a new thought. This is something that has been evolved through many forms. And I was also, they call it the oasis of, not the Mediterranean, but there where Mesopotamia is, that before the water level rose, people were living there 18,000 years ago. That's when the water started to rise, according to archaeology, I believe. But for 100,000 years, that's a long time to establish all kinds of connections. So this thinking without interruption, this language, I'm so glad that you love it. So thinking about Hermes and Mercury.
What, in language?
Yeah, just, I guess, some further thoughts about what they have to tell us. I know that his mother was Maya.
Right? And his father was Jupiter, right?
Yeah, she was the daughter of a Titan god, Atlas, which I thought, isn't that interesting? A daughter of Atlas.
Right.
Because it gets back into the earth, this whole combination of earth, matter, and spirit.
Right?
Yeah, just a way of speaking about it.
Well, exactly. And as far as like the caduceus goes too, I mean, another one of the symbols, like you were talking about, is the yin and the yang, and the sun and the moon, the male and the female. I mean, it was also about the two hemispheres of the mind, right?
Left and right.
Right, the left and the right.
Receiving and protruding. And the tortoise, that lyre.
Right, the lyre, right?
Lyre, yeah, that's
his musical instrument, right?
Represented Earth.
Right.
The tortoise, an old symbol for
right.
Mother Earth.
Yeah, it was the tortoise shell, right? It was created out of a tortoise shell. Yep. Yeah, those mythic symbols have a lot of story to them.
There is. I was listening to another show on 1150 KKNW, and that's where you're listening to, folks. This is Talk Cosmos. It was yesterday, and they were speaking about holograms. And I really found myself listening, because what the idea was that he was saying that in a hologram is where any little part signifies a part of the whole. So whether it's your ear on the body, like the hand, the foot, the ear, the eye, the tongue, they're all parts that different studies and disciplines can read the whole part. Like the chart. Our chart is a hologram of the universe.
Right.
Yeah, our interactions between, which gets back to observing, like you're a stargazer.
Right.
I love the stars. Here in San Luis, it's a little fierce, but there are moments.
Yep, we have those few nights when you can actually see them, right?
What we need. Oh, okay. Well, I guess this has been delightful. Let me please thank Shannon. Thank you so much. This is Shannon Hayes, Seattle astrologer. Go to Talk Cosmos, our webpage site. You'll find how to contact her. You can contact me. You can join our email list. I'm in the process right now of connecting so that you'll get notifications, or go on Facebook to Talk Cosmos and like us. We love you, and we look forward to the next time. And we have Marie O'Neill coming up next week. She is a master astrologer from California. She has a great group. She's, well, her own founder of Padma Life Coaching, Santa Rosa, studied with Stephen Forrest, Alan Oken. There's lots.
Wow.
And we'll conclude Gemini.
Thank you so much, Sue, for having me.
Oh, I've loved
It
it.
was really fun.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.